They always say Christmas is for forgiveness. Nobody tells you what to do when your own son stands at your table, raises a glass, looks you in the eye and says calmly that he has hated you for years. Not a drunken insult, not a messy rant. A verdict. And then, the next morning, he wakes with a headache, sees the house still lit with holiday lights, and asks why everyone looks like someone died. He remembered nothing. I did. I'm Alex Moser, 68 years old, a grandfather. I built my company from nothing and spent decades believing hard work could fix anything. That Christmas night taught me loyalty isn't armor, it's a weak point. Because within a month, I would be removed from my own company by a board vote held without me. And for the first weeks I was certain my son had done it. I was wrong. The person who tried to erase me was someone I had already tried to erase from my life 5 years earlier. A mistress I regretted more than any bad deal. A woman who knew exactly where my guilt lived. And she didn't start by coming for my money. She came for my family. Christmas at my house was usually predictable. My daughter Elena arriving early, my grandson Milo tearing into wrapping paper, the same music, the same food, the same forced warmth that families use to cover old fractures. This year, my son Daniel arrived late and tense. He'd been around more recently. He worked for me now, department head at Moser Industrial Systems. That job was my attempt at penance, my way of saying, I can't undo the past, but I can give you stability and respect. Daniel didn't look grateful. He looked cautious, like a man testing ice. He brought his own bottles, bourbon, expensive, and a small clear bottle he said was for cocktails. He was drinking too quickly, not celebratory, more like he was medicating. After dinner, when Milo was distracted by toys and Elena was clearing plates, Daniel stood up with his glass and tapped it gently, like he wanted to make a speech. Elena's face softened. She thought this might be a peace offering. Daniel steadied himself on the table, then looked directly at me. For years, he said, I've tried to be the son you wanted. My heart did something foolish. It lifted. And I want everyone to know, he continued, voice steady, I've hated you for a long time. The room went silent in that terrible way where you can hear the house breathing. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply said it, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. You ruined my life, he said. You bent it into whatever made you feel proud. He lifted his glass toward me. Here's to you, he finished. The man who always knows what's best for everyone but never pays for it himself. Elena moved toward him, trying to take the glass. Daniel jerked away as if her touch offended him. I'm going to bed, he said, and walked out as if nothing had happened. Milo stared at me wide-eyed. Grandpa, did Uncle Danny say he doesn't like you? I forced my voice to stay calm. Uncle Danny drank too much. But I sat alone later under the blinking tree lights and replayed Daniel's words until each one felt sharp. For years. Tried. Hated. And I knew exactly where that hatred started. 15 years ago, when I sent Daniel to the United States Army Academy to become an officer. When he begged me not to. When I insisted. Daniel was 18, intelligent and gentle in a way that never looked weak, only thoughtful. He wanted to study architecture. He drew constantly. He talked about buildings as if they were living things. I heard uncertainty. I heard risk. I grew up poor. I built my life with discipline and stubbornness. In my world, respect came from uniforms and titles. So when the academy acceptance came, I treated it like salvation. Daniel treated it like a sentence. The night we argued, he stood in the kitchen with his hands flat on the counter. Dad, he said, voice tight, please, I don't want this. I answered with the certainty that destroys relationships. You're going, I said. You'll have discipline, a future. You'll be set. He looked at me like I had chosen not to understand him. You're deciding, he whispered. That's my job, I said. And he said the truth I didn't deserve. Your job is to be my father. I chose pride anyway. He went. He graduated. He served. But the academy didn't strengthen him the way I imagined. It reshaped him into someone who survived, not someone who lived. He came home with a medal, a limp, and a look that said part of him never came back. We didn't talk about it. We lived around it, pretending silence was stability. Then my wife died. Daniel drifted further. And eventually he returned, older, worn, needing work and somewhere to stand. I saw my chance to make amends. I gave him a job at my company. A month later, the board removed me. 3. The vote. Moser Industrial Systems wasn't a family shop anymore. We manufactured specialized components for critical infrastructure and major contracts. Over the years, I had brought in investors, advisors, a board. I still believed it was my company. Paperwork disagreed. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Alex, Martin Weller said. He was the board chair, polished and soft-spoken. The kind of man who sounded reasonable even while cutting throats. We need to speak. About what? I asked. The board held a vote, he replied. Effective immediately. You're being removed as CEO. My office window showed my campus as if nothing had changed. Employees walking with coffee, cars pulling in, a normal morning. On what grounds? I asked. Governance concerns, Martin said. Liabilities. Investor confidence. Liabilities. I want the vote record, I said. You don't need to come in today, Martin replied. Security has been instructed. I hung up and drove there anyway. At the gate, a security guard I'd known for years stepped into the road with an apologetic face. Mr. Moser, I'm sorry. Orders. Orders from my own board. Sitting in my car outside the building with my name on it, I got a text from Daniel. You okay? Heard something happened at work. He was inside. I was locked out. I called him. He answered too quickly, too casually. I'm in a meeting, he said. A meeting with whom? I demanded. With Martin, Daniel admitted. People are talking. They want stability. Stability. I heard the real meaning, replacement. Did you know this was coming? I asked. No, he said, but his pause was a fraction too long. That night, Elena sat at my kitchen table with a mug she didn't drink from. You think Daniel did this? She said quietly. I don't know, I lied. Elena shook her head. He's angry, yes, but this is too organized, too clean. Enemies, she meant. I stared at a framed photo of my wife and felt the old shame crawl up my spine, because there was one enemy I had invited into my life, a woman named Vanessa Hale, my former mistress. Vanessa had entered my life as a consultant during an expansion. Intelligent, charming, attentive. She noticed my exhaustion and fed my vanity. The affair lasted 8 months. I ended it the day my wife confronted me with a hotel receipt and asked me to tell her she was wrong. I couldn't. I confessed. My wife didn't scream. She simply collapsed inward like something tore quietly. I fired Vanessa and paid severance. I made her sign an agreement. I thought money and legal language could close the door. Vanessa smiled when I ended it. Of course, she said, amused, not wounded. My wife and I tried to heal, but cancer took her before we finished. Vanessa disappeared, or so I thought. Now, with my company stolen and my son inside it, I searched for traces of her return. No direct evidence in my old records, only absence, which is its own signal. I called my attorney, Ross Calder, and demanded board minutes and notice. He warned they would stonewall, so I went to someone softer. A board member named Cynthia Parrish. She opened her door like she was seeing a ghost. We had no choice, she whispered when I demanded an explanation. What did they show you? I asked. Cynthia swallowed. A compliance packet, claims, photos, messages, a report saying you moved money improperly, They said contracts would collapse. What source? I asked. Cynthia's voice dropped. Martin said it came anonymously. Anonymous. And who is guiding the transition? I pressed. Cynthia hesitated, then said it. Vanessa. She's back under a different name. Martin brought her in as crisis management. My stomach turned. Vanessa wasn't a memory. She was inside my company again, and she was using my shame like a key. That night I dug through old emails and found something that tightened my chest. Martin Weller had been in contact with Vanessa long before the affair ended. The implication was ugly and clear. She hadn't just met me. She had been positioned. Then my phone buzzed from an unknown number. Stop digging. Take your buyout and disappear. A second message followed immediately. If you keep calling people, I'll send your grandson the photos. My grandson, Milo. A child. I stared at the screen until anger became something colder. Certainty. You can attack my reputation, my legacy, my pride, but you do not threaten my grandson. At that moment, the story stopped being about business. It became about family. I drove to Daniel's apartment. He opened the door looking exhausted, irritated, defensive. I showed him the threats. Color drained from his face. Who is that? He whispered. You know, I said. You just don't want to admit it. He denied it automatically, then admitted Martin and a consultant, Vanessa H., had been helping him, talking to him, feeding him lines that sounded like truth because they were built on pain. She says you never respected me, Daniel said, that you sent me to the academy because you were ashamed of me. My throat tightened. I didn't argue the part that mattered. I had forced him. I had done damage. I told him the truth I should have told years earlier. I was wrong, I said. I tried to turn you into something that made sense to me. I made my fear your burden. Daniel's jaw clenched. I don't remember Christmas, he said suddenly, confusion breaking through anger. I remember the feeling, but not the words. What did you drink? I asked. He told me about the bourbon and the cocktail bottle Vanessa had given him at an office party 2 days before Christmas. My stomach dropped. There are ways to loosen a person's tongue and blur their memory. Vanessa didn't need to make Daniel lie. She only needed him to speak while his defenses were down, and then wake up ashamed and isolated. Daniel stared at me like he was finally seeing the trap. She's trying to make me CEO, he said. Yes, I replied, as her puppet, and as the final knife in my back. I needed proof strong enough to stop the takeover and expose her methods. I didn't have time for polite legal requests. I asked Daniel for something I never wanted to ask of my son. Pretend you still trust them, I said. Go back, record them. He looked sick. Then the academy discipline in him surfaced. Cold competence that had survived because it had to. Okay, he said. Tell me what to do. A friend of mine, Marisol Nguyen, worked in security. She knew my wife and still carried respect for her memory. She helped us set up a simple recording device. A pen Daniel could carry legally because he consented to recording his own conversations. Daniel went back to the company. I waited in my car nearby while Marisol monitored audio. I heard Martin's smooth voice. How's your father? He asked Daniel. Upset, Daniel replied. Business, Martin said lightly. He'll get over it. Then Vanessa's voice entered the feed. Warm, amused, familiar. I know Christmas was hard, she told Daniel. I don't remember most of it, Daniel said. Vanessa laughed softly. That's probably for the best. My blood went cold. She demanded Daniel sign on to the transition and publicly distance himself from me. Martin supported her, framing it as stability. Daniel asked about threats. Vanessa's tone sharpened, and she corrected him like a teacher. I warned what happens when people don't stay in their lane, she said. Children don't need to be involved. That's why you'll do the right thing. Daniel asked if she drugged him. Don't be dramatic, Vanessa said. You drank. You said what you meant. Then she added a phrase that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. Good boy. It wasn't just manipulation. It was control. We had her voice. We had threats. We had coercion. Now we needed the compliance packet, the forged evidence used to scare the board, and something that would break her publicly before the New Year's vote that would lock me out permanently. Ross called. The board had scheduled a special shareholder meeting to ratify my removal and appoint new leadership. New Year's Eve, noon. 2 days. If Vanessa succeeded, legal options would shrink. Paperwork would harden into permanence. We had 48 hours. A young manager named Ethan Price finally called me after midnight. His voice trembled like he'd been running from something. They made me deliver files, he whispered. Vanessa, she scares me. Did you see the packet? I asked. Yes, he said. And I think it's fake. The PDFs were created recently. The timestamps didn't match what she claimed. Human trails. Ethan told us about Vanessa's private rented office suite, her war room, where she kept documents. He had a keycard valid only until the shareholder meeting. I'm not doing this for you, Ethan said, ashamed and frightened. I'm doing it because she threatened kids. That's wrong. He gave us the address and disappeared. We entered the suite quietly at dawn. It looked exactly like Vanessa's mind. Clean, elegant, predatory. A long table covered in printed materials. Whiteboards with names and arrows. A board of photos. Strategies labeled like business objectives. There was a folder titled Moser Removal. Inside were documents meant to look official. Claims of misused funds, shell vendors, improprieties. Marisol spotted inconsistencies immediately. Formatting shifts, stitched data, composite pages. It was designed to create panic, not truth. Then we found a folder labeled Daniel Moser. Notes, triggers, trauma points, phrases that worked. He wasn't a person to Vanessa, he was a lever. And then we found the page that turned my stomach to ice. It was written like an operation. Give Daniel the cocktail bottle, create disinhibition, trigger resentment speech, accept amnesia, increase isolation, push him toward the board narrative. She had orchestrated my son's humiliation on Christmas like a corporate maneuver. Marisol photographed everything, pulled metadata, and copied files. In a drawer, she found flash drives. On them were audio recordings. Vanessa speaking openly about using Daniel, about not caring about legality, about going nuclear if I resisted. On the wall, pinned like a chess piece, was a photo of my wife with a sticky note beside it. Elena made a sound like grief turning into fury. We left with evidence strong enough to collapse Vanessa's story. The shareholder meeting was held in a hotel conference center. Investors, board members, a few reporters pretending not to be reporters. Martin Weller at the podium, voice smooth, already acting like history had been settled. Vanessa sat near the front in a dark suit, composed, respectable. When her eyes met mine, she smiled as if she'd already won. Martin began speaking about governance and stability. Then he introduced Vanessa as instrumental in guiding the transition. He moved to the vote. Ross stood. "Point of order," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I'm serving notice of an injunction request." Martin tried to dismiss him. Ross didn't flinch. Fraud, extortion, coercion, forgery. Murmurs surged. Marisol connected her laptop to the projector. Screens appeared. The war room photos, the forged PDFs with creation timestamps, the strategy sheet labeled Christmas Event. Faces changed. People leaned forward. Someone whispered a prayer. Vanessa stood. "Those are fabricated," she snapped. "This is retaliation." Ross nodded calmly. "Then you won't mind hearing your own voice." He played the recordings. Vanessa's voice filled the room, clear as glass. "If Alex pushes back, we go nuclear. The boy is the lever." Then another. "Don't worry about legality. You worry about outcomes." The room went silent in disbelief. Ross said, "And we have a witness." Daniel entered, pale but controlled, and walked to the front like a man stepping into fire. "My name is Daniel Moser," he said. "I was pressured to publicly distance myself from my father to make this takeover easier. I was offered leadership in exchange for cooperation, and I was threatened when I hesitated." Vanessa hissed his name. Daniel turned toward her. "You threatened my nephew," he said, voice shaking with anger. "You threatened to send a child explicit photos to hurt my father." That sentence changed the room. Children are a line most people recognize as unforgivable. Daniel held up the pen recorder. "I recorded meetings because I was afraid." Vanessa's mask fractured. She tried to regain control with the only weapon she had left, rage. She pointed at me. "You ruined him," she spat. "I just gave him the truth." Daniel's voice cut through. "You gave me poison," he said. "You gave me a bottle and told me it would set me free." And then Vanessa made her fatal mistake. She laughed, hard, cruel. "You don't even remember what you said," she sneered at Daniel. "That's the beauty. You said it. You meant it. Now you're too weak to own it." A collective inhale moved through the room. She had admitted the design without realizing it. Not a confession in legal words, but in moral clarity. Ross spoke calmly. Law enforcement had been notified. 2 uniformed officers appeared at the back, not dramatic, simply present. Martin's authority collapsed. Vanessa's composure shattered. Investors began demanding explanations. Reporters raised phones. Vanessa was escorted out. Martin followed, pale and sweating, the smoothness finally gone. And for the first time since Christmas, something in my chest loosened. Not relief yet, but the return of air. The next weeks brought hearings, resignations, negotiations, and consequences. Cynthia resigned and later testified. Board members who claimed ignorance were forced to answer why they voted based on a packet built on fear. Martin Weller tried to distance himself, but recordings and documents tied him to Vanessa's plan. His career collapsed in real time. Vanessa's consultant identity evaporated the moment evidence surfaced. Contracts disappeared. Allies vanished. The light she feared did what darkness never could. It stripped her. The company wobbled, then stabilized once shareholders understood the crisis had been manufactured. The board offered me my position back quickly. They wanted the founder to return and calm the water. I could have taken it and declared victory. But I looked at Daniel and realized that if I grabbed power again the same way I always had, then I hadn't learned anything. Vanessa would have proven her point about me, even in her defeat. So I stepped back into an advisory role. I supported a restructured board and an interim leader chosen for competence and clean hands. Not Daniel, not me. Daniel deserved a chance to build his own life without being used as a weapon, by Vanessa or by his father. One January night, Daniel came to my house. No warning, no anger in his posture, only exhaustion. He stood in my kitchen staring at the counter like it was safer than looking at my face. "I keep thinking about what I said," he murmured. "You don't remember," I said. "I remember the feeling," he replied. "It was real." I nodded. "I don't doubt it." His voice tightened. "I hate that you pushed me. I hate that you didn't listen. And I hate that part of me still wants you to be proud." That last part broke something open in me. "I'm proud," I said quietly. "Not because you wore a uniform. Because you walked into that room and told the truth when it would have been easier to take the power they offered." Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know how to forgive you," he whispered. "Then don't," I said. "Not yet. Just don't let my mistakes decide your future." He looked up, eyes wet, anger and grief tangled. Why did you do it? He asked. Why the academy? The question I'd avoided for 15 years. I exhaled slowly. Because I was afraid, I said. Afraid you'd drift into a life I didn't understand. Afraid you'd struggle like I struggled. Afraid that if you chose a path I couldn't brag about, then maybe I hadn't built anything worth building. Daniel stared at me like he was hearing my real voice for the first time. And because, I continued, voice raw, I didn't know how to love you without trying to control you. Silence filled the kitchen. Then Daniel stepped forward and hugged me. It was stiff and awkward at first. Two men who didn't know how to touch without making it a contest. Then his grip tightened, and I felt his shoulders shake once. That hug didn't erase 15 years, but it cracked open the door to a future that didn't have to be built on resentment. Vanessa tried to take everything. My company, my name, my family. She almost succeeded because she understood what I refused to face. Guilt is a lever. She used my guilt about the affair. She used my guilt about Daniel. She used my fear of public shame. For a while, it worked. But guilt can also force honesty when pride fails. Milo knows nothing about threats and recordings and board votes. He shouldn't. He is a child. He should only know that his family is safe. The last time he came over, he ran into my arms and told me he wanted to build bridges so people don't fall. I held him and thought about what my wife tried to teach me before she died. Titles don't heal families. Presence does. Christmas will come again. And if my son ever raises a glass at my table, I won't wait for him to be drunk to hear his truth. I'll listen while he's sober, because listening is the only kind of power a father should ever want.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.